mute yourself. Let's make sure everything is going fine. One of these days I won't check because we'll have just done it so many times that I'll be confident in the setup. But I want to check and make sure that everything... Wait. Do you want to say something so I can make sure?
I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay. So I can hear me. Da-da-da-da-da.
I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay. We're good to go then. Alright. Hello, everybody. Carly here.
Hi.
Jason. We're here with our final review in the dark for Rings of Power Season 1. We're going to be talking about episodes 7 and 8. I just watched episode 8 yesterday. Episode 7 came out a week ago. This is not the end of Reviews of the Dark. This is just end of for Reviews of the Dark and for Rings of Power Season 1. Definitely looking forward to Season 2. I can tell you that right now. But, yeah. Before we get started, we want to go ahead and like this video and subscribe to our channel. I think those are the things we're supposed to say. Ring that bell to get notified. Something like that. And then, there we go. Okay.
Well, let's start with what your overall impressions of the season were. Well, since this is the end, everybody at this point's probably seen all the episodes. What are your overall impressions of the show? And then we'll get into specifics of 7 and 8.
I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. As a fantasy show, I quite enjoyed it. I think they did a good job of having a story. Was every single part of it perfect? No. But there's a lot of really good stuff. There's very probably easy for anybody to relate to this, but the two favorite characters for me are Elrond and Durin.
That seems to be pretty consistent for what I'm seeing across the internet. Is everybody wants more of Elrond and Durin. Everything else just kind of seems to be mixed.
Yes.
But that's very much how I feel about the show. Is I have very mixed feelings. If you've watched any of our other reviews, it was, I love this episode, I didn't like this episode. I love this episode, didn't like this episode. And so the whole season for me was a mixed bag. I thought it had a lot of great stuff.
On average, though, did you like it?
I think so. I mean, so for me, this is tailored for me. I will watch this sort of stuff regardless.
Fantasy without extra gore and sex.
Yeah, I will watch this regardless. It's got nothing that'll specifically turn me off. Like, if I'm bored, this is the kind of thing I would put on. It's just good fantasy. However, as a Lord of the Rings fan, and as a overall story fan in general, I don't think this season was put together well. So getting into spoilers, the show is called The Rings of Power. We craft the 3 rings at the end of episode 8. What are we going to do for the next 4 seasons?
Well, it's funny though. So Nerd points out that there's kind of this almost meta moment where Elrond says to Celebrimbor, "We've got 3 weeks to do the work of 3 centuries," which is supposed to be how long it actually takes to craft all of the rings, right? They spend almost 300 years crafting the Elven, the Dwarven, and the Men rings.
And so I figure there will be more times where they will craft additional rings and hand them out. To me, I don't like, because then I feel like the seminal moment is the rings, right? So if you spread it out across the season, the rings are then no longer important. It's the character stories, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think character and story is king, but the show is supposed to be about the Rings of Power, and you're not really...
I know, you're
skipping over the parts about
like
the Ring of Power.
5 total minutes on the actual crafting of these rings.
Yeah, it was
From the conception of alloying the metals or the mithril with lesser metals in order to stretch it and enhance it. Which I feel like if Celebrimbor is actually as great a smith as he is,
he would know that.
He would have already thought of that. It wouldn't have taken, spoiler, Sauron to tell him, alloy it.
So, yes and no. So I also saw online, they're like, you know, I don't understand the difference between, you know, forcing them together or coaxing them together. Mm-hmm. And I immediately thought, just because we like to cook, I was like, oh, this is emulsification.
Yeah.
So emulsification is where like you're beating eggs together and you're adding oil to make like mayonnaise. And that's how you make mayonnaise is it's eggs and oil. And if you slowly stir in the oil while beating it together, it has to be slowly. It all comes together to make what is mayonnaise. A completely different product, as if like when you add like eggs and oil and flour to make like a cake. Like if you just add eggs and oil, they won't really be together. They'll separate because eggs are kind of water-based. They repel each other. But when you add the oil in slowly while you're beating, it emulsifies, and there's a science behind that. It does come together. It will separate, much like peanut butter or Italian dressing, or it. So they do separate, but they stay together for a time. And so I was like, oh, I would be willing to bet this is a true practice of emulsification where you have to add a certain thing in slowly for it actually to come together. So to me, I thought it was brilliant. I was like, aha!
I liked the way that they had to put it all together. I really enjoyed the creation process, but Celebrimbor being who he is, if he's as brilliant as he believes himself to be, this should have been something that he had thought of himself. But maybe he's just a really good smith.
Maybe he's not as great as he thinks he is.
But he's not as great as he thinks he is.
Ooh, that would be a twist. I don't know if I'd be okay with, but it would be interesting if he's not quite as good as he thinks he is.
I think the reason they do that though is because we need to have Sauron whispering to him, nudging him in the direction that Sauron wants.
So that's the other thing. So we have Sauron, who is Halbrand. And it's revealed to us that basically he got to where he is by convincing everybody that they're making the decisions that they think are best, but it's really everything that he wants. Which I thought was great. Yeah. Except for, like, super rushed. Like, if that's your story, right, where Sauron is slowly getting what he wants, we are dropped, not nuggets, but like pin drops of just information. Like we see a little bit with Farazan. He whispers, is like, I can tell you where she's going, so he gets his crest. And also, saving her from the ocean. That seems completely unnecessary. Or the fact that he was on the ocean to begin with. Which was my problem. Like I said, if Halbrand ends up being Sauron, his story doesn't make any sense. Why was he on the ocean to begin with? Why was he traveling with this band of people?
Does he have foresight at all of any kind?
I don't know. But who they all seem to relatively be pretty nice. She's like, I'm not going to abandon this person out in the sea. Like, help him onto our raft. And then he saves Galadriel. And then he tries to kind of be his own person out in Numenor. Like you could take that as a part of Sauron's deception. Like, no, you think I was just trying to do this, but this is really... But there was, for the audience, there was never any really, will they, won't they, sort of, is he Sauron, is he not Sauron? Like, you get little glimpses, you're like, huh, maybe.
It was almost too subtle, is what you're saying.
Yes, it was, that's a good way to put it. It was too subtle.
So, there's, having read a couple of things from what the actor himself has said, he's like, I was told to make Halbrand the character. And he's like, and by episode 3, he's like, I knew that my character was going to be Sauron, and they kind of confirmed it. And so he's like, I tried to sprinkle in what bits I've learned about who Sauron is, because he's like, I've done my studying, I've read, the Silmarillion, I've read the histories, I've done all of that. So he's like, so I tried to sprinkle in what I thought was appropriate for who Sauron would be. But also we're at the tail end of his slow emergence. Because he's been around for 1,000 years, kind of doing his own thing, right? Since Morgoth's defeat or whatever. And so we're at the tail end of this slow reemergence, his slow way back to Mordor.
So that's problem number 2 I have. Is his slow emergence, to me, was supposed to be putting all the pieces in place, right? In the books, he causes the fall of Numenor. He whispers in the ears of the elves to get them to make all of the rings, and then he goes back to Mordor to craft the one ring to control them all. That is the end, which is why I'm so confused as to what else do we do. I mean, other than build up to the Great War that you see right before the Lord of the Rings, the little intro there.
Where Isildur has the chance to destroy the ring, blah, blah, blah.
Right. But now we're talking about 60, 80 years, if not more. And I'm just... You really could have spent a season in Numenor. A season convincing the elves. A season of crafting the rings. A season of the rise of Sauron.
We've got all these other stories that they're wanting to tell, though, right? So we've got whatever is going to go on between Elrond and Durin, and Durin's rise to power, right? And then potentially we're going to see start of the fall of the Mines of Moria, Khazad Dûm falling. We've got Nori and Meteor Man.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other story that they're going to be able to explore, and we're going to be able to explore with them. So there are other stories that they're telling, but I do know what you mean by what is the main storyline. Like, I think we're going to get slow crafting of the rings throughout, because, I mean, they were built over the course of 300 years. They're not going to have us actually go through 300 years. It's probably going to be more like we're going to do it over the course of, like, a couple of years, so we'll do some time skips here and there.
See, and I would have enjoyed if they did time skips per season, right? I don't know if I like this necessarily, because... Like, these extra stories that you've mentioned that they're adding in, none of them necessarily tie into the rings. These are all made-up things. So they could have looped those all in as they were telling the actual story, but it's almost like, hey, let's get the actual story out of the way in Season 1 so we can tell our own story in Season 3, or 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's like, okay, but now I'm kind of no longer along for the ride, because it's like, what do I as a fan now have to look forward to? Yeah. The only thing left for a fan like myself is Sauron crafts the one ring, and the elves hand out the other rings, and then there's a war. That's it.
Yeah.
They missed all the political intrigue. They missed all the deception. They just blew on past it.
So Numenor has not fallen yet as of this point.
Which is really odd.
So it'll be interesting to see, are we going to get some of this, Queen Muriel and Ar-Pharazôn, stuff going on, because she's going to be blind, so it's like, how can you lead a country if you can't even see? And she's going to be like, I can still think, and she's like, and we're going to go back there and we're going to whip their butts over in Middle-earth, and Pharazôn's like, okay, bye, I'm going to be king then. Maybe that'll happen. But I still think that could have been
in the other seasons, right? Or, like, the fall of Numenor, I really think should have been Season 1, where you had Pharazôn becoming the man of the people and kind of taking the crown, and then Muriel leaving over to go to Middle-earth, and then maybe even keeping with Halbrand convinces Pharazôn, and the Numenor falls, and then you have Sauron reborn on Middle-earth, because that's kind of what happens in the book. And then as a shapeshifter or whatever, he goes to the elves, whispers in the ears, because then it also wouldn't have been so sudden. And we also would have had more of the we're dying, we need the Mithril, and that would have lasted a good solid season. The building of the forge, which I guess just happened over an episode.
That did bug me, because they're like, it'll take until next spring to build But apparently the tower's already done. But we never even got like a reveal of the tower. There was no like sweeping upward camera motion of this tower forge.
Well, there's no decision making. They skip right to the important part, right? They just skip to the climb. Like,
I feel like there was an episode that got missed. There was supposed to be an episode between 7 and 8.
Because they're like, we have to build a forge. Well, what are we going to build with it? I don't know, but something of power. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, they skipped the forge, okay? And then they skipped the decision, like, because they're like, well, maybe it should be like a crown, and then we'll put it on Gil-galad's head. And he's like, no. And then they're just like and they're like, yeah, I heard you're going to make a crown. Actually, it's going to be something smaller. So, like, they completely skipped over the decision making.
It does feel like there's a whole episode missed.
At least. I feel like it's a whole couple of seasons missed. I feel like this story was supposed to be the 5 seasons, and for some reason the writers wanted to get it out of the way so that they could tell their own story, which I normally get, but after this we know what happens.
So I will say another thing that makes me feel like we skipped something was we didn't get anything further about Isildur's fate from seeing him, poof, in episode 7. Like, he's only alluded to as your loss to Elendil, his dad. Mm-hmm. But, like, we didn't even get, like, anything. We know he's alive. He has to be alive because of where he ends up in the stories.
Yeah.
But there's almost no point in, like, pretending he's not alive because 99% of the people watching this know he's going to be alive. So why didn't we even just get, like, his eyes opening, ash covering him or something like that? Just anything. Strange decisions that were made. Because also, like,
we have another thing that bugged me was Galadriel finally figures out that Halbrand is Sauron. Mm-hmm. I was like, wait a second, you're Sauron, blah, blah, blah.
Well, because before that, too, the Mystics had said to Meteor Man, they're like, you are Lord Sauron. But then, like, the next scene is Galadriel and Halbrand and Celebrimbor saying things that Halbrand has said, right? And Galadriel's like, wait a second.
Yeah, and we're both like, Sauron.
Yeah.
No, that was a...
Meteor Man is a red herring.
Yeah. But she finally figures out that he's Sauron, and she confronts him on it, which I thought that whole thing was great. See, that's the thing. The individual scenes I thought were great. The overall storytelling was terrible. Because, like, then they're just like, but we need gold and silver of the most pure. We need it from Valinor. And
so
she's
this
like,
dagger that she's been carrying around the whole season finally has a purpose.
Which is fine. Like, I'm fine with the whole sacrifice for the greater good thing. I'm fine with her giving up something that she loves. But she just figured out he's Sauron. And she's like, Sauron's plan? Yeah, we're going to do that.
But we're going to do
we're going to do it my way.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, what? It's why would this person who's so hell-bent on, I'm going to destroy you and everything that you're trying to build, except for this, because this is kind of cool and I kind of want to keep this around. Like, it makes no sense that she would want to keep the rings.
I wonder if there isn't a bit of insidious leftovers from what he was saying to her, because I mean he's trying to act like he's repentant of the things that he's done.
Oh, yeah.
And so maybe she's like, okay, maybe, but this is already being done, let's make sure we do it the right way.
I think the only thing that it is she can't tell them, one, because she will be just like spiked, but the other thing is they need the rings to survive. Mm-hmm. Like, and that includes Galadriel. Can't kill Sauron if you're already dead. So I think that plays into it. But if that was it, right? It shouldn't have gone to, I just discovered he's Sauron, to I'm going along with Sauron's plan. Yeah. It should have been, I just discovered you're Sauron. I need to struggle with the decision that I still need to let it go forward to save my people. Like, there should have been an internal struggle. Even for Galadriel, who wants to kill Sauron, there should have been an internal struggle of, if I do this, my people die.
Yeah.
But it was just, nope, I'm going along with it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. So going off of that, that's obviously why she needs to go forward with it. But I like how she says, she's like, 1 will corrupt, 2 will divide, but 3 keeps a balance. Mm-hmm. So she's like, okay, we have to do this. I clearly made a mistake. That guy is Sauron. But he's right in the regard that if this is what saves our people, it has to be done. So it needs to be done the correct elvish way.
So,
But none of that was like verbally said. None of that was internally, thought. None of it was portrayed in any way. That's just what I assume was reason behind her decision. But also, if you know the dude is Sauron, you don't give him a chance to, like, I don't know, stop you from killing him. You don't be... That's like...
I know, it's like, but tell me who you are.
It's like Gru from Despicable Me, who announces everything he's going to do before he fires his weapon.
Freeze ray!
Yeah, exactly. And so she's like 99% certain, right, that he's Sauron or something devious enough to be of Sauron's. But she's like giving him the opportunity to, like, get away with it.
But she's supposed to be like a great general, right?
I'm sorry, but if I knew that this was a mass murderer, I'd probably kill him and ask questions next.
And like, or at least summon guards or whatever.
Yeah.
Something. Yes, you will be in trouble, but this exceeds you being in trouble.
Yeah. Even if it means she doesn't get to go to Valinor, but again, maybe her second thought was, if I do tell them he's Sauron, they won't go through with making the rings, which then means all the elves die. But again, then we should have seen that struggle, right? Yes.
And even for a character who's so headstrong as Galadriel, we should have seen this struggle, because just jumping into it makes no sense.
You even said, there she goes off, running blind again.
But like, even Sauron's deception also kind of makes no sense. Mm-hmm. He's like, we're going to make a crown. Gil-galad, nah, we're not going to make a crown. All right, we're going to make 2. Okay, we'll make 2. Like,
yeah, 2 smaller things. It's like, what are they going to be, bracelets then?
It doesn't compute. Because if in Galadriel's logic, 1 rules, 2 divides. 1 corrupts, 2 divides, and 3 balances. Why would you ever want 2? Because as Sauron, you'd be like, well, that's just going to divide. That's the other thing. If you're Sauron, why would you want to save the elves? You don't. You don't want to save the elves.
I think his thing, though, is the control over flesh. I think this was just the beginning of him trying to put things out. He wanted to be there for the creation of these rings. And I think he wanted to be there so that he could insert his will over these. That's why the elven rings are the only ones that don't have any kind of issues with them, right?
Yeah, it's the elven rings because they don't have issues, yeah.
So that's why he wants the rings to be made, is because, I mean, if he can control the elves too, and then the dwarves and the men, I mean, that's... everybody becomes your slave.
See, but you can't have secret machinations and not explain it to the audience.
I know.
It's like, well, this is actually what I planned all along.
I know. It's this inferring. Great. There's a high level of inference that we've been having to make in a lot of these decisions. Like, I would have actually been fine if there had been like a small conversation, 2-minute clip of Celebrimbor and Halbrand saying, okay, well, Gil-galad doesn't want a crown. Well, what's something that we can do to help? Well, let's make 2 bracelets then. And so then he's like, oh, okay, yeah, and I'm going to go find Galadriel and tell her. And then we cut to the part where Galadriel's at the river, and he's like, we've decided to make 2. It's like, okay, now we know where that decision came from.
Maybe, but even that's not enough. Like,
I know.
This whole making of the rings should have been a whole season of its own.
The actual making of the rings itself, I wanted more of.
Yes, the crafting would have been interesting, but
I love
also
watching rings get made. It's
Sauron
quite fun.
Whispering while Galadriel is trying to circumvent, but not letting anybody find out, but having to rely on her friends, but being a bad... Like, all of that could have been a really good, of its own season. We've seen that sort of thing done before in television, where it's like, I need to somehow stop the bad guy without telling anybody I'm stopping the bad guy. Because
that's a superhero.
Yeah, it's classic superhero stuff, right? Yep. But they skipped over... Like, I'm so... baffled. Like, this last episode, while I enjoyed it, I hated the story beats. Because the wizard, so Meteor Man, was a clear red herring because they start the episode, yes, Lord Sauron. I'm like, that's not how you're gonna reveal Sauron.
Yeah, no. Like, it's not going to be an announcement from the rooftops like that.
Yeah, I was like,
And I even
what?
turned to you and I was like, okay, I could see him being a wizard was going to be my first guess. A wizard of some kind.
I was hoping for a
A
Balrog.
Balrog would be a second option. I was like, but I never once thought that he would actually be Sauron. And, like, I even said in our last episode, I was like, what if Halbrand was telling the truth? That he took the insignia off the body of a dead man. And he actually is Sauron. So, thank you. Guessed that right. But, like, the mystics, Lord Sauron. And I'm like, no.
Again, though, the whole shows are come and go, but shows with great villains tend to have staying power. Mm-hmm. Sauron's a pretty great but vague villain. Like in the Lord of the Rings, he doesn't do much except for you constantly feel his oppression in the Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. Constantly. Even though we see him twice. We see him at the beginning during the Battle of the Second Age, mm-hmm. and we see him at the end when he's finally defeated. Mm-hmm. But we constantly feel his oppression. His story doesn't make any sense. Assuming Halbrand, I mean, I guess he is. So Sauron being Halbrand picks up, the crest from the body of a dead man. He just happens to know what it means. Happens to care. Like, oh, this might come in handy. I'm going to keep this with me. You know what else I should do? I'm going to get on the ocean with a bunch of randos. and then she's like, oh, look, an elf. You're the elf who's been chasing me. You know what? Never mind. I'm going to go back to the land. But it's okay because what I left there was I left my apprentice Adar to make the land exactly how I like. Nice and ashy and hot. Like
perfect for the orcs.
Right, yeah. He's just like, I'm going to leave my stuff. I'm going to leave my sword behind. I've been in power and doing what I do, but like he just like, nah. Like to me, all of it seems random. It doesn't seem like he put this together. Mm-hmm. But then he's like the big bumbling buffoon where he's like, oh no, I actually planned all that.
There is
all of it.
There is the theory that that Halbrand was Halbrand in the beginning, and Sauron actually is impersonating him from some point onward. So it could be that Halbrand was on a fishing boat. They were going fishing and stuff in the ocean, and they got attacked by the monster, and he's relatively a good person who saved an elf. And later on, Halbrand dies, or Sauron kills him, and so yes, he still took the insignia off the body of a dead man before he's thrown in prison.
No, because they have that conversation on the ocean.
What if though too, he did still have some kind of veil, covering his memories or whatever, and so he was kind of like, I'm kind of like a darkish person, but I'm not Sauron, until later on he learns that he is Sauron.
I don't think so.
I feel like there's a lot of reasonings that some people might have for some of these things, but I agree with you that if he was Sauron from the very beginning, so the first time, why would he have been on the boat in the first place? Whose boat is this boat anyway?
Yeah, the whole I meant for that to happen is a terrible excuse.
It is. It's like the excuse of, I just wanted to.
Yeah. I had nothing better to do. I'm eternal.
I'll just be evil today.
Yeah. And like, helping your characters grow and all that, like, it just...
Yeah, why would he direct Galadriel to where he actually is?
Or any of it. Why would you save the one person who's actually chasing you? You would have so much freedom.
It's the ego of the bad guys, right? If the bad guys would just do what they intended to do, the good guys would never actually win.
But it's fine if it's ego, but you have to back up ego with skill to show that this bad guy, this was his intention all along, and he is the master planner. He planned for this to happen. Mm-hmm. But as of right now, none of that's been explained. We're just like, it just happened, and it just happened to work out for Sauron. What a lucky guy.
Right?
Yeah. Because, like, I don't assume that any of the stuff that happened to Hellbrand was necessarily real, but technically saved on the boat. He went to Numenor and, he convinced his way out, so that's fine. But then she convinces him to come with him, which again could have been Sauron's, playing of both sides, but we don't really see that. And then he kind of sort of gets stabbed in Middle-earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she saves him and takes him to the elves.
Well, takes him to the elves to be saved.
Yeah, I don't...
It's a lot of happenstance.
It's a lot of random. It doesn't seem like it was intentional. Mm-hmm. And a random villain is not a good villain.
No.
But no one... We root for the villain's downfall. But if the villain...
Connecting with the villain also helps make them a good villain.
Yes.
Like, being able to understand, if not agree... Like, not necessarily agree with them, though. So, like, Thanos, right? Totally understandable. His reasoning behind get rid of half the population and everything will actually be fine. That's understandable. Not agreeable, though.
But even if you don't understand them, so that's one type of villain, right? Mm-hmm. Another type of villain is you got like just your evil overlords. Voldemort.
Okay, yeah.
He's just evil, and much like Sauron, he just wants to rule everything.
Yep.
Doesn't necessarily want to kill the Muggles, but he wants to rule it all. Mm-hmm. We never at any point understand or agree with him. And we root for the heroes to take him down. But as the pieces are laid, we're like, okay, this is why he did that. This is why he did that.
Well,
this is how the heroes won this battle,
yeah.
But this is how Voldemort won that battle.
And you've known his plan since he was like a kid, because he started planning this at like 14.
But
all of it.
But not as you're reading the story. As you're reading the story, the plan is unveiled.
Yeah.
But at every point, like even in book 1, which I've actually read book 1,
Ooh.
even in book 1, we know his purpose is to come back to life, mm-hmm. to restore his body. We know that's his purpose. And so we know what the heroes are trying to fight against. We know what the villain is trying to accomplish. So there's an end goal, there's a win, there's a lose. That's the story.
Yeah.
What the heck was Sauron trying to do in this season? We have no...
Apparently he really just wanted to go on a boat.
And get some rings made.
Yeah.
Them and fancy rings.
Yeah.
But also, if it's his darkness going across the land, if it's his, like, evil that is causing the tree to degrade, if you really want to fight my evil, you know what you should do? You don't give pointers!
Yeah.
It's like, I really tend to drop my left guard. You might want to stab me right here. It makes no sense. At this point, he's a terrible villain. At some point in The Lord of the Rings, he becomes a great villain. But, terrible. Now, I like all the scenes. I like the scene where Sauron's like, I'll make sure that no one ever forgets that you helped bring me to power.
Yeah, that was sinister.
I was like, ooh, nice threat.
Yeah.
But also I like where she finally commits to, well, I gotta kill this sucker. And goes to stab him, what a terrible way to stab somebody.
Yeah.
And he blocks her with such ease.
He's just standing here bored, and she's struggling with all her might.
And we've seen how good she is.
Yeah, which by the way, sweep the leg.
Yes.
Just kick really hard at the shin.
But then how easy he infiltrates her mind. I thought that was all really cool.
Yeah, you hear that high-pitched whine, and then boom, we're inside her head.
And I would have liked the scene in her mind more, because we get to see basically he's lying to her, right? Mm-hmm. Rule by my side. Mm-hmm. Be my queen. We get that cool shot of them in the water where you get to see the reflections. Yeah. Very cool. But to this point, we don't see Sauron the liar, right? We only just now learned that he's Sauron.
The best lies are wrapped in truths, though.
Right, but we don't get because we, as an audience, we don't necessarily connect to it. We don't be like, he's lying! Don't listen to him!
Yeah.
But, she's just she listens to him, and she, contemplates, not a bad plan. You know what? You actually might want peace. But you want to rule, don't you? Well, see, that's the problem right there.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's your problem with this whole plan?
Yeah, he wants to be the boss.
It's, like, that's just... man.
Just real quick about that scene, though. I liked the way his face was morphing as he got more and more angry. You can see his eyes getting more red. They even get slitted, and his teeth get all jagged, which made me think of when Bilbo kind of morphs.
Oh,
when he gets all
yeah.
mad at
mad about not having
Gandalf.
the ring.
Yeah. I was like, oh, like, I've always kind of liked the idea of, especially if it's magic related, right? So, I mean, even the Force is a magic system in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It physically changes the person who's dealing with that. Like, I mean, you get the Sith and their yellow eyes. Like, it's almost like he was losing control of making himself have this fair form. And so just the evilness was seeping through and physically changing his features. And I was like, that was just really cool.
Again, the shots are really nice.
Yeah.
This show is beautiful. I think they capture shots really nice. Dialogue and story-wise, they are suffering.
There is a distinct lack in, I feel like, believable characters.
Yes.
Like, really, Elrond and Durin, and maybe this is why I like them so much, is not just their camaraderie and the accents.
You believe it.
Yeah.
You're like, yep, you guys would be best friends.
Yes.
Like, and it's just like, yes, and if you were best friends, this is how you would act. So, maybe enough complaining. Because at this point, Galadriel and Sauron, to me, are both the crux of the show, but the worst part of the show, unfortunately.
Well, and she was still, she hasn't learned anything either. And
She's still the same character from episode 1.
She's running fast and blind, and she'll whine about things too. He'll be like, Halbrand's saying something or another, just like, but we fought side by side. Yeah.
And I'm evil. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to just rip on this. I did like this show.
I do like it.
Wanted to get those complaints out of the way, though.
It bugs me deep down.
I know.
Because Tolkien, as we discussed, one of the great quotes about Tolkien is he builds up thousands of years of backstory only to destroy it.
He builds up empires only to crumble them for backstory.
Yeah. So he makes it believable. These worlds are real.
I mean, he didn't even have to go as far as how was the world created and who are the gods and all that. He could have just dropped us in the middle of an elf and human story.
And so a lot of that we see in the show, right? We're like, woo, this looks real and cool. But then when you get to the way the characters act, you're like, you're an idiot. Like, this is not how a person would act.
Especially somebody who's the grand general of, like,
who's
the
thousands of
entire
years
army.
old.
Yes.
Anyway, okay.
Okay.
My favorite part of the show,
Yes.
and most everybody's, is Elrond and Durin.
And Disa.
Their story is awesome.
Yes.
Discovering the Mithril is awesome. Which
the
apparently has
relationship of-
no play into the rest of the story at all, because they only use that little chunk
Yeah.
anyway.
The story of Durin and his father as well. And
Is
Durin and
awesome.
Disa's relationship. And, like, we even get to see their little gremlins running around in the background. I want more of Khazad-dûm and the dwarves and Elrond and his friendships in there. Because, like, he gets kicked out, and that was kind of, like, it. I mean, we got, like, Durin and Disa's conversation about after that. But, like, Elrond's kicked out, and I'm like, but I want more of the Art Deco dwarves.
But I even said, because we were rewatching episode 7, I said, to me, this is before we got to episode 8, I said, to me, what if they make Durin and Elrond the love story? And I don't mean an actual love story. I don't mean they fall in love. But I mean the arc of a love story, right?
Yeah.
Where they're so close, they rekindle their friendship, right?
Yeah.
They're so close, they save each other's kingdoms, only for the decision, for that decision to bring Sauron to power and the fall of Khazad-dûm, to drive them apart, where you have heartbreak, and you're like, no, not my favorite couple.
Starcrest lovers.
Yeah. So then you get, as like you mentioned, like, this is why dwarves hate elves.
Yeah.
Even the closest of them ended up falling apart.
Yeah.
That would be great. And they could still do that.
Heartbreaking, but
They could
great.
still do that, except for Mithril now has no point in the story. None.
Yeah, so, because they had the chunk. They've used that chunk that they got, right? We know that we have the Mithril mine, but we also know that there's a Balrog down there. We already know that. And it just feels kind of like... I don't know. I want more of that, and because I mean, there's also some political intrigue going on in there as well. You got Doran and Disa potentially considering a coup of a form.
Yeah, dethroning the fight. Like and that whole thing is super interesting to me. It's been so great. Episode 7 was awesome.
Yes.
Where they have this scene and he's crying. Where he's like, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." Basically, he's welling up in his eyes.
Well, and he's like, Doran. Son of Doran, grandson of Yen. You joke, but we have our secret names, and he was about to tell Elrond.
No, he even says before that. He says the best thing a dwarf can do is live up to the honor of his father's name.
Is to be worthy of his father's
name. As he's betraying his father, and he kind of like does this side to side look.
Yeah.
Where he's like, "Wait, what am I saying?"
Yeah, I'm saying that, but what am I doing?
Yeah, and that whole moment was great.
Yeah.
Only then to turn around and be like, "Yeah, but we have our secret names," which is new added lore, but so good because he's like,
I like that,
and because he keeps referring to him as a brother. He's like, "I care for you so much. You were a brother to me."
And he even later says it to his dad. He's like, "I love him as if he was fired from the womb of my own mother." Like
he says, he is as much a brother to me as if he was fired in the womb of my mother.
Yeah. Which
is a great line.
Which that was great, but it also followed something where Durin the dad, that's what I'm going to call him now, Durin the dad.
Durin the dad
was talking about his mother, right? He was talking about his mother and how like when you were born, you couldn't breathe. You were struggling. We stayed up all night to make sure you stayed alive. Blah blah blah. So he's using emotion to get Durin the son to agree with him. And then when Durin the son tries to use emotion to get Durin the dad to agree with him, Durin the dad's like, "Don't you dare talk about your mother." It's like, that's what you just did.
Well, he did it to understand that the father, and this is just it, like, you get it from both sides. The father's like, "I did this for you, and your mother did this for you, so that you could live." And he's like, "And I had a dream, a vision even, that you would grow to be a great dwarf," and I love the line, "and you would move mountains."
Yes, the way he just shouts that too.
It was so good.
The follow line though of how do you expect me to move mountains if you freak out every time I make a tiny hole? And I was like, that's exactly what it's like to be a kid.
Yeah,
to
under the eye of your father. He's
yes.
like, "You say I'm great, but you stifle any individuality in me or any idea unless it originated from you." That's what it was.
Yes.
Suffocate
me.
That whole scene was amazing. Was so
Excellent
good.
Excellent dialogue there.
But also the way that it is presented and written is very Tolkien-ish-esque, right? It has a little bit of the poetry of like fired in her womb, right? Mm-hmm. Very kind of poetic, but also something that a dwarf would say rather than birth from my mother
as if we were
came
born
from
together.
or born together.
Yeah.
A dwarf would say fired in the womb.
Mother's womb. Yeah.
Yes. Like that is a dwarven way of describing gestation. Like all of that whole scene was great because kicks out Elrond, but then they sit and they talk, and both of these two hot-headed dwarves just laying into each other.
Yes.
And man,
I'm glad it doesn't come to like physical blows, because I always hate when like family stuff turns into like physical fighting.
I'm fine when brothers and sisters do it.
That's a little different, but father to son, that's a whole different beast that should never be touched. But like, so they've had their argument, and he's basically like, he's basically saying, "You're wrong, Dad." And his dad comes over and takes what I'm assuming is the equivalent of a prince's crown.
Yeah, and takes it from him
and throws it to the ground.
And tells him not to pick it back up.
Yeah, leave it. That's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
And we see Disa has one that's similar. So this is why I think it's similar to like prince and princess, whatever, the heirs, right? So in this moment too, I think we saw Durin the son get disowned, more or less.
I think so too, yeah.
And he comes home, and I'm assuming he's told Disa at least a little bit, because then she's like, "He's a fool, and he's got lice in his beard."
That was before.
Oh, that was before.
That was
that
before.
the? Okay.
Because that was after in episode 7, the very beginning. Elrond is in front of the king, and he says, "And if you help us, we will provide this."
Right.
And he says, "I'm
For
going to talk to
5 centuries.
Yeah, and he's like, "I'm going to talk to my son," which was another good scene. He's like, "What's your decision, father?"
And his dad's like, "No."
So that scene even was so good because you see Durin the son deferring to his father, which later comes up, and when Disa's all upset, he's like, "And what am I supposed to do?" And she's like, "Go behind his back." And he's like, "And what does that teach our children about defying the will of a king?"
Yeah.
He's like, "That does not teach respect. That does not teach you follow your leaders." Like,
because he even says he's not. It's one of these ways. He's like, but he's not just my father. He is my king as well.
Well, and that's what he brings up, right?
Yeah.
Not defying my father. That's one thing, but defying the will of the king. He rules these mountains, and you want me to say no?
Because I mean, Durin supposedly will rule at some point himself. So, and he's got 2 kids. Imagine if you got 2 little hymns defying his will as a king.
Well, and it only sets a precedent, which I think is actually very wise of Durin.
So we actually got a chat in here. I'm sorry if it's been here for a while. We got something from Corey Castle. He says, it seemed Durin III was referencing the doom of Mandos almost. He was trying to teach Durin IV, and he wasn't trying to hear it. Durin IV is too blinded by allegiance to his personal friendships to act as a prince. I think that's true, yes, but also as a prince, you know, a future king, you need to know how to keep your allies as well.
They bring that up, right?
Yeah,
so he's like,
friendship or not, like
he's like, you say that their fate has been decided long ago. Mm-hmm. He's like, but what are you supposed to do? Just let them die? He's like, that's not keeping your, like, what were the words that he used? He's like,
he uses the words allies, I'm pretty sure.
He does, but letting your allies fall is not, there's something that they were talking about. Oh, I can't remember.
I can't remember.
But but basically the sentiment was, if you let your allies fall, that is worse than saying, well, this is what fate wanted you for. Like, that doesn't protect your kingdom.
Yeah.
And so, like,
But Durin the dad, Durin the Third, references, he's like, if we do this though, like, there are things watching us, and if we do this, that can spell doom for us as well. But I mean, that's kind of like if you're let's say you're in, Durin even says this, like, but what if Durin's boat was leaky, and, you know, Elrond is drowning, you would still help him into your boat, even though you have a leaky boat, because you're not just going to leave your friend to drown if it saves you for a little bit longer.
I don't think they mentioned the boat being leaky, but...
No, but that's kind of what I feel like Durin the Third is trying to say. Like, if we do this, we both drown.
So, it could be, yeah. But that's part of what I love about the conversation, is we see it from both points of view. Mm-hmm. They're both probably right in their own vein, which is why I kind of describe it as a love story, right? Because ultimately, Durin the Son will take over. Mm-hmm. They will mine the mines.
Release the
Balrog and cause the downfall of Khazad-dûm. Mm-hmm. Which is why the Balrog is named Durin's Bane.
Yep.
This whole thing is kind of his fault. But, like, if done right, which they've already kind of gotten off on a bad foot, but if done right, you know, Durin gets to turn him and then be like, I did this for you, and it caused my people to down. I never should have, like, gone against my father. And I mean, that back and forth...
Is Disa something from the stories?
I'm looking so far... No.
So I wonder, you know, maybe Disa dies. Because, I mean, obviously the Durin lineage continues, so his kids are probably still going to be fine. But, like, Disa dies. His dad dies. All, you know, loads of his brothers and sisters of the mountains, you know, they die too from this. And so he's like, I never should have listened to you. I never should have let you back in. I never should have let you stay for dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And... I mean, I could see that feeling like, even though both of them went into it, you know, with the best of intentions, obviously nobody can expect something like a Balrog. Like...
Well, and also, what do you do... Excuse me. What do you do when the fate of your species is at hand? It's like, I'm sorry it turned out this way for you, but what else was I supposed to do?
Yeah, just let my people... Well, so the elves actually have two options. They can leave and still be fine.
And I think
but
that's
they
what actually
wanted
makes
to
it really
stay.
good.
So they made a decision that does actually affect everybody.
See, and I think that would be really good because as we build it up, they get closer, relations are close, and as things start to crumble apart, you could have this conversation of Elrond being like, what else was I supposed to do? He's like, you could have left.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys wouldn't have been here, which is sad and would break my heart because we're brothers, but at least you'd be alive.
Yeah.
My people aren't, and that's your fault.
So I got another couple of comments from Corey. They said, it seems like Durin III and Gil-galad both know much more than is expounded on in the show.
Agreed.
Gil-galad predicted Galadriel would bring the spread of the flames of Sauron, and Durin III says mining there will bring down the mountain. So mining for the Mithril will bring down the mountain. So I mean, yeah. This is honestly why I want more of the Durin and Elrond stuff.
Right, because you get...
Or even just the Durin stuff.
It's such a great story. And honestly, it should, in my opinion, it should have extended out the entire season, right? Mm-hmm. Or the entire seasons. Mm-hmm. Because mining the Mithril should have led to the creation of the rings and other stuff. Because, Frodo gets a Mithril thing. And
which, that's a lot of Mithril, by the way. If that is pure Mithril, that's a lot.
But I still have issue with what's the point of the Mithril mines at this point. But is also Durin and Elrond is my favorite part of the show. It's so good.
Easy, yeah.
Even just the characters themselves, not even together, but themselves. Durin by himself, arguing with the other Durin, or even just looking at Khazad-dûm. Khazad-dûm is awesome. Talking to his wife.
His kids.
And then Elrond, being kind of the outcast, half-elf, political. Everybody's trying to use him for his own purposes.
Friends with the dwarves, even.
But even Galadriel trying to use him for his own purposes. Mm-hmm. In one of my least favorite scenes, where he's like, I'm sorry, I never should have sent you away. He's like, I won't make that mistake again. I'll learn to trust you, blah, blah, blah. And then later on, one of my least favorite scenes is like, what's going on? Remember that promise you made? Yeah, but you're making it really hard to trust you.
Yeah. To keep that promise.
Elrond, even Elrond by himself is a great character, great story.
Yes.
And so is Durin. It's kind of the other one. Galadriel really kind of bugs me, and Sauron really kind of bugs me. I like the actors. I don't like what they have to work with. I think the writing of their arc has been super weak. I think it was super rushed.
Yeah.
In my mind, it doesn't align with the story of Elrond and Durin. What are we going to do? Jump to the end in episode 1, season 2? It's yep, we mined it all. It's all done.
Well, maybe part of it is because the Elrond we have right now is actually fairly similar to the Elrond we've already known. He's not as kind of mysterious and closed off, and he's not angsty and teenager. He's actually fairly similar.
He's thousands of years old, which is what I wanted from Galadriel. I wanted Galadriel to be wise.
Well,
and aged.
So with Galadriel, I'm okay with her having a bit of angst. Her brother, who she loved more than anybody, was killed. Her husband was taken from her.
Well, she assumes dead, but yeah, we know better.
Yeah, was taken from the last time she saw him, right? Whatever. He probably went on a mission. She probably went on a mission. They just haven't been back together since.
The way she talks about it, she assumes dead.
Yeah. So I'm okay if there's a bit of extra anger. Not everybody can control their emotions perfectly. But I still would like to have seen her gain a bit more wisdom toward the end of this season at least, but instead, last episode, she's still running fast and running blind, just like Elendil said. She's making these just unwise decisions, and I'm like, come on, you've been through how much now? And you haven't learned anything, and I would like to have seen at least some of the Galadriel that I know from the movies and the books to have been present here.
I will say... So normally my least favorite characters are kids, right?
Yeah.
In this case, my least favorite characters, unfortunately, are the main characters. I've had experiences like this before, and I can't remember what it was.
You don't like Michael Burnham from Star Trek.
Oh yes, Star Trek Discovery. I don't like the captain.
Is she captain now?
Sure, I don't know.
Just Michael Burnham.
She
You just
wasn't
don't like her.
I didn't like her. She's the main character, and I don't like her.
Yeah.
Same sort of difference here. Like in that show and in this one, I like all the side characters, even a little bit the kid. Like has a purpose. I don't like the main character. What is there another?
Yeah. By the way, thanks for being here, Corey. Really appreciate you chiming in and stuff. That makes it a lot more fun for us too. We can go like this all day, but it's fun to have another person coming in. So he says, I've got the theory that Sauron has actually been around Galadriel, probably, longer than we realize, poisoning her mind, and he followed her onto the sea. The chance shipwreck meeting, he says, that wouldn't work for me. So, maybe he knew she was out there and was kind of following the boat or whatever, and then he says, trying to rehabilitate what I see as Galadriel's character.
So,
and that has been a really hard shift for me to be okay with, and I don't think I ever will be okay with this version of Galadriel. I understand having some hot-headedness, I understand having some anger at this, but elf or not, even if your maturity takes an extra 100 years, you've got to have learned something by this point.
well, and so
I do agree though with maybe Sauron did have his eye on her for longer, and so he made himself be out on that boat.
well, okay, I could work with that. I think you're onto something, Corey. Maybe, but the part where that falls apart for me is if that's the case, because Galadriel, but also Sauron are my least favorite characters. As we've mentioned before, Sauron is just happenstance. I just lucked into being an evil overlord.
And maybe it's because we're used to bad guys monologuing their plan. But I wouldn't have minded a bit of a monologue here on his plan to let me see, oh, you have been playing
But you can
this.
monologue and still seem smart. There are great villains who still tell you what they're doing, or heroes who discover what the villain is doing. It's like, oh no, this was his plan all along.
Yeah. Like discovers a diary or something.
Something, yeah. In which gives you insight into the villain's mindset, right?
Yeah, something that makes me realize you've actually thought this out.
Right. And so as of right now, Sauron doesn't seem smart. He seems like, well, I'm just traveling the world and things are just working out for me.
Yeah.
I would love to see that this was a part of the plan. He knew Galadriel went north, so he went south. Mm-hmm. You know what? Maybe if I took her onto my side, that would work out better for me. I hear that she's going to go to Valinor. I'm going to get on the ocean, because if we could see that he just knows people, right? Mm-hmm. It's like
he knows she's not going to go.
She's not going to go. Right, yeah. So he gathers a bunch of idiots onto the boats, and then so he goes onto the boat, and he gets attacked by a sea serpent. And so, but he's like, Galadriel, this worked. So at least some of it was planned, right?
Yeah.
So that we see he's a smart villain to the point where he can read people and overcome people, like,
but
etc.
still, all of this is inferred.
All of this is only inferred by our theories.
Yeah.
None of it is yet to be confirmed. So far in the show, all of it just seems to be happenstance, and that he's lucky.
Yeah.
Which is my biggest problem.
Dude rolled a crit 20 on his luck.
Yeah. Man, he's got some mad skills. He's been maxing out that luck.
One dice to rule them all.
One dice to rule them all, yeah. But, so, I think, in general, I really like the show. It's beautiful. The side characters are really good. I even, at this point, don't even quite mind the kid.
And I've actually grown to really enjoy Nori and Meteor Man's story, especially at the end, where she's like, I'm a Harfoot. You know what? I've had enough adventure. I'm going to stay home with my family, doing what she thinks is the right decision. Not that either one was a wrong decision, but she's like, this is the right decision for me. I'm good, okay? Mm-hmm. And Meteor Man's like, all right, sounds good. But her family's like, no, you need to do this. And so she's like, okay. And so she goes on she's going on the adventure, which is a great line, that going alone is a journey but an adventure is best shared or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's so
Well,
nice.
so a journey is done alone, an adventure is shared, which
Yeah.
was a great line.
Yeah.
Very, very Tolkien, very poetic. Corey put in another comment that says, was the worm even real? So the worm being the sea serpent.
Yeah.
Which
'cause
is
of his
possible
glamour
that it
magic.
wasn't. Like, because Sauron is a master of illusions. I mean, we get a little bit of that when he grabs her hand and he goes into her mind, right? Mm-hmm. None of that could have been real, which would have been great if
Yeah.
we learned, like, you never even got on a boat.
Yeah.
That would have been, because then
There weren't even people there getting
Oh, my
eaten by
goodness.
the sea serpent. It may have just been him.
that would have redeemed so much of her story.
Yeah.
If we're just like, this whole time, the way why you've been so weird is because you've been under Sauron's influence and you've been battling within yourself, which is why you're kind of running every direction within yourself. You've been fighting, trying to rip yourself free of Sauron's control. That would have been genius.
Yeah, so she leaps from
I'm
the
down
boat.
with that, Corey.
Yeah.
Good job.
He says maybe it was just him pulling her out of the water once and the rest was a dream placed in her mind. I like the idea of memory manipulation for, like, historical things. So, like, she jumps from the boat. Maybe she actually kind of started to, like, fail in her physical abilities because, I mean, she's swimming across a stinking ocean.
She's still mortal. They live forever, but mortal. Like,
Yeah.
she can die.
Yeah, so like, you know, he rescues her at one point and places this elaborate memory manipulation in her. I mean, one of my favorite
Which honestly, man, Corey, I think you're onto something. And I think if they dive into this episode 1 of season 2, because this could really redeem her character. Mm-hmm. Because if that's the case, we even see evidence of that, right? Because Galadriel asks Celebrimbor, "Where did you hear that?"
Yeah.
And you see this kind of shaken,
Yeah,
almost gray-eyed out. He's like, I'm not sure. I think
I said
I think
it.
I said, yeah.
Was Halbrand there?
I don't know. Yeah.
Does it matter?
And so he was, it was all very cloudy in his mind, right?
And that was very, like...
It would have been great if they revealed something like that. It's that you never even got on the boat.
Yeah.
Or that, like, I've been
when
in your
you leapt
mind
from the boat, I saved
this
you.
entire time. Well, man, that would have been great.
Yes. Good job, Corey.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting that in there.
But also, what could have been?
This is all still just an inference and a theory. So, like, I'd like to see next season, I'd like to see some kind of further explanation. Because, I mean, maybe he was also seeding her anger a little bit, too, and her continual drive to have to, like, be correct or whatever. Like, she's just very... I keep using this word. She's just angsty. And I don't care for it.
Yeah, so he writes that he loves Galadriel in the lore and he wants her redeemed. And I agree.
Easily,
Galadriel
yes.
is a really great character.
I loved her portrayal in the movies. I have read the books. That was also granted a long time ago. But, like, from just what I know of who Galadriel is, she's pretty awesome.
But even more, I want her redeemed because arguably Galadriel's the main character, and so is Sauron.
Yeah.
I need them both to be both redeemed and kind of fleshed out. I need to see that this was Sauron's plan, that he has been pulling the strings all along for everything to happen, and that Galadriel, maybe going with Corey's idea, maybe something to redeem her story where it's like, okay, I like you again. Because if we can get that done, I will fall back in love with this show.
There is a way for It Was All a Dream to actually work. I know, because that's
maybe.
essentially what it would be.
Oh, yeah, mind manipulation all being a dream.
Yeah.
I got you.
So there's a way for that to actually work. And I think that if that was the case, like, because his influence on people is not bashing you in the head. It's not direct. It's not, like,
It's
overt.
Coaxing, which I
Yes.
thought was very perfect when they're like, oh, let's coax the metal.
I'm like,
And
you mean like you do?
like he does with people. He's like, wait, this is what I do.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, the whole emulsification thing that I mentioned earlier was just genius.
I want to see more of the actual creation of the rings.
I do too.
Because that was so fun.
Watching people craft stuff is...
There's one person I
Is
follow
great.
on Instagram who makes rings, and it's just so interesting to see. Like, so when they're, you're like, that seems like an awful lot of liquid for making only a ring. But that's actually what it is like, it just goes into this tiny little bar, and then they form it, and they mold it, and then all that kind of stuff. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah, and there's a YouTube channel I subscribe to, which is, they make a lot of props for Hollywood, including Lord of the Rings. I don't know about this show, but they do for, I can't remember who they are.
The Forge and Fire or something like that?
I don't know. It's been a while since I've watched one of their videos. They usually make Man-at-Arms.
Man-at-Arms.
But they make a lot of stuff specifically for Hollywood. But watching them make it is it's mesmerizing.
I would have been totally fine with a 30-minute section of
while you have voiceover
picking out the metals
of this and that,
maybe even trying with gold and silver at first, and realizing we needed more pure gold and silver that could only be found from Valinor. Oh, I know where we can get that. Her dagger.
To bring in Brandon Sanderson. Journey before destination. We're just jumping to destinations.
Suddenly you're at the destination.
The journey is the story. We want to know there and back again. We don't care that he's at his home and at some point he left.
Yes.
We don't care about that. We want to know the journey.
There's a reason we have these creative YouTube channels now. There's a reason people follow these kinds of things. Like, people want to see the journey of these things being made.
Right. It's not, oh, by the way, I made a ring.
Yeah.
What? When? Like, I want to see you make the ring.
I will say, though, some of the parts of the ring creation, I was like, that's just a CGI turnaround that they're doing. That's just a CGI turnaround. Like, I would have actually liked to have seen some of these things be more practical.
So
effects.
some of it was pretty fun. So the mithril in the lava looking like
an eye.
looking like that was pretty good.
Yeah.
But pouring out the rings, while it was neat, also I'm like, you guys have way more material than just for 3 rings.
Yeah. Well, it's only some of that ended up being fully usable, though. Because, I mean, just because you melt down a bunch of metal doesn't make all of it usable.
It does if it's pure.
I guess.
Like, and that was the other thing is
I think
they
her
missed
blade, though, was mixed with, it was probably a steel dagger with a gold and silver hilt, is what it seemed to me. I don't think you would make a silver dagger blade. So, I mean, there's probably some steel or iron in there, so they had to get that out. So, and then they were doing the spinning thing, and you actually specifically see, like, what looked like 3 different, almost like rings of metal inside when it was still hot and stuff, and it was spinning around. I don't know. Corey says echo.
It's probably me because I'm loud.
Yeah, probably hearing you over on mine. Yeah. We tend to get loud when we're excited.
I get really animated sometimes.
Yes.
But let's see. I mean, that kind of sums up all my thoughts. I mean,
there's a lot that happened in these episodes. I don't know if we necessarily need to go over every part of it.
No, but episode 7 by far was my favorite.
Yeah.
Episode 8 was still really good, but really left me unsatisfied and kind of highlighted the complaints I have with this show.
Well, so the last thing we get from Numenor 2 is Isildur's sister is going up into where the Palantir is.
Oh, yeah.
Because the king, in not a full lucid state, mistakes her for Muriel and says, I've looked into it for too long that I can't distinguish what is from what will be and what was from what is. So basically, he can't distinguish past from present from future.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming she's going to go up there and she's going to see it. She's going to touch the ore probably and see the vision of the fallen Numenor. So it'll be interesting because we'll have Muriel and Galadriel who will have seen this, but also now kind of just a regular person. Is she going to start telling people?
Maybe, and maybe that'll bring them back to being the faithful, because some of the faithful will end up leaving Numenor before its fall. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That whole story, they really just kind of dropped. Like, it's like, okay, like, didn't even give a tease as to what's going to happen next, because I'm assuming she took the Palantir.
Yeah.
Or at least had a vision. I don't know. They really just like, and end.
Yeah.
But
Nerd of the Rings was like, are people even going to remember that this was like a storyline?
Honestly,
2
probably
years
not.
from now?
No. I don't. I don't believe that they will.
2 years for the next season.
I know that's
That
killer.
seems really long.
I was watching something about how does somebody was asking how does this even happen? If you buy this for that much amount of money and you know you're making all 5 seasons, how did you not start production already? They're like, somebody needs to get fired over this.
Yeah.
Because time is money. That's business 101.
That's 2 years for people to not talk about it.
Well, and that's, now you're out of the zeitgeist. Now, you have to rearrange people's schedules. Like, unfortunately, that is a problem. And I was like, yep, it makes me super sad. We got to wait 2 years.
I'd take like 8 months to a year. I'd be fine with waiting a year in between. Corey's got another comment. You reading it?
Yeah, he says, I don't think that's right in the show. I don't think that the lore Palantir showed the future. That was just Sauron screwing with the Dementor in the lore.
Denethor.
Or Denethor.
The Dementor.
I don't know. I know there's the Palantir. So the Palantir, I'd have to do a deep dive again. But if I remember right, and I could be wrong, the Palantir, there's like 7 or 9 of them. And most of them are lost, and they're mostly used as communication stones between different cities, which we're obviously not doing in the show. Because they placed one in like Gondor and Elendil. And then there's like the Great Palantir, which I actually think I do believe that the Great Palantir or the Master Stone can see into the future. And if I remember right, was made by the great craftsman. I always get him confused. Feanor. I always get him confused with Galadriel's brother. Finrod. Was made by Feanor. And Feanor, being such a great craftsman, I don't know. I believe that it could look into the future. I don't know, but I believe it did give people visions of the future. But you could be right that it could have just been Sauron messing with them. But I honestly don't know.
So yeah, primarily communication. The one in Minas Anor was marred, showing all but the most strong-willed the burning hands of Denethor II. Stones best responded to those with the right to use them, hence Denethor's ability to utilize the Stone of the White City easily, whereas Saruman struggled with its use and was eventually overcome by Sauron. When two stones were communicating with each other, then another view from a third stone would find them blank. Huh.
Okay, well, just tell me if you find the answer.
Yeah, I will.
Someone else wrote, they said Rings of Meh. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. So
I don't know if I'd go as far as meh. I think it was good. Room for improvement, but it was good.
It was very much a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Where it went from an episode I didn't like to an episode I loved. And this final episode just really highlighted a lot of the problems I have with the show. Being season 1, unfortunately, this is a cardinal sin in television. I hate it, but unfortunately, many shows, and people will tell you this, you'll run into friends and they'll say, just get through season 1 and it'll be good. I think season 2 through 5 is going to be spectacular. I have high hopes for that. They've spent a lot of money. Once you get through season 1, you really start to see the problems and the flaws, and you get feedback from the fans, like true feedback. So I think 2 through 5 is going to be great. We're going to iron a lot of this out. It's just so unfortunate it took them 8 hours to figure that out. It's super unfortunate. It's a cardinal sin in television, and unfortunately it happens all the time. Just get through this season, or just get through the first 5 episodes, or whatever the excuse is that people make. It really, really picks up in season 2. I hate it, but I actually think that's going to be the case here.
So the stones were primarily used for communication. Could really only be used, though, by those who had strong will. And could be manipulated by Saurons, especially to show people what Sauron wanted them to see. So, the fall of Numenor.
But does it show the future?
No.
Oh.
Not specifically, because it's a thing of Sauron was manipulating stuff. So they could, a master, as they're described, a master of the stones could then use use it to see other places though on the face of the planet, not just other stones. But Sauron, being Sauron, he can manipulate what people are able to see, and so he was showing Denethor II only what he wanted Denethor to see. So this downfall of Numenor, it's maybe a bit of like a fulfilling a prophecy that doesn't actually exist kind of thing. So like he's like, yes, Numenor is going to fall, and so he's, by the people believing that it will fall, they create the downfall themselves. It's like a Tomorrowland. Everybody thinks everything sucks, so everything does suck. Got a few more comments, it looks like. Should have showed that in the movies too. Rings of Met. I need characters to connect. We're writing answers to the mystery boxes instead of really caring about the characters. Corey says 5 out of 10. Not worthy of Tolkien. I'm not really sure if I'm ready to give a rating to the show, to be honest, because I know that there's going to be all of the seasons. So I'm putting a bit of faith in the long story and seeing where it goes come season 2.
So here's my argument for there. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily not worthy of Tolkien. I think that's maybe a little harsh. I will say it is not. I wouldn't even say 5 out of 10. I still really enjoyed just watching it. Kind of like a good popcorn flick, right?
Yeah.
You go, you watch it, you turn your brain off. What's a good example of that?
Independence Day.
Sure, Independence Day.
I love that movie.
Not a whole lot to dig into.
No.
Not a whole lot of lore. But it's just fun. You turn your brain off, you watch the film. I would equate this more to that. But maybe of the higher caliber, right? Because it does have some lore stuff you can dig into.
I'm not
Is
sure.
it a disappointment? Yes, but I think that's because my expectations were so astronomically high.
I'm not sure if saying something is or isn't worthy of somebody is a fair way of just saying that, though, when it comes to an adaptation especially.
Well, and so...
Because had Tolkien not wanted this stuff to be done, the rights never would have been sold. They would have stayed as books, and that's it.
And he was alive when the first rights were sold off to make cartoons and stuff.
So
and if you guys have seen the old cartoons, they're not that
so
great.
He's been part of the decision, at least from, the beginning parts of it. So
sort of. I mean, he died.
Yeah.
I can't remember when he died, but he died a while ago.
A lot of this is also kind of the creators filling in blanks and putting their own spin on
and there is a lot
things.
of blanks, right? Because they don't have all the rights, right? Which is why I don't necessarily fault them on all of it. I fault them on character and story.
Yeah.
That is your... Story is king. If your story's not good, I don't care how good your characters are. If your story's not good, it doesn't matter how beautiful it looks.
You can tell we're story-based video gamers.
Very much so. I can't get into the other types of video games, but like, story is king always. Mm-hmm. And so if your story's not good, nothing else matters. And they dropped the ball on this. They could have had a terrible-looking cave troll in episode 1. And I wouldn't care if I was enthralled in the story. And quite honestly, like if you go back and you watch like the theatrical versions of The Lord of the Rings, they are good. They are. Are they really good? No. Is it lacking stuff? Yes. Hence the extended versions. The extended versions are really good. They're just really long.
Yeah.
It's better chopped up as episodes.
Yeah, you can delve further into stuff and explain things.
I think the extended versions are really good. Mm-hmm. And I think are, as our commenter would put, is worthy of Tolkien. Is the theatrical version worthy of Tolkien? Maybe, maybe not, but it plays better with a general audience. So you got to be a little fair there.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about TV shows. TV shows are, by nature, long-form storytelling.
Yes.
They had all the time in the world. They had 8 hours to sort this out. Why didn't you? You have no excuses. Because they probably have 800 hours of footage.
Yeah.
So they have no excuse for why their story fell apart.
I would have liked something more concise. So we obviously need Galadriel and Sauron because, I mean, it's Galadriel and Sauron. So we need their stories. I think Elrond, he ties into Galadriel and Sauron because we got the Mithril thing, so therefore Durin is connected to that as well. I think those are actually the two stories. Like, I want those to be figured out the most. I like Nori, I like Meteor Man. I actually don't think they were needed in season 1. The only reason I think Meteor Man is in season 1 is because they wanted to give you some kind of looky-loo on who Sauron might be. I think it would have been more fun for Nori and Meteor Man and the Harfoots and them to have been season 2, and we get the meteor going overhead, and you're like, oh, this is kind of back to that moment and how it affected some other people. So we've been seeing all this damage and nonsense going on over here, but now we get to see how it's also affected everybody else. I think it would have worked a little bit better. It would have given more time to Durin, Elrond, and Galadriel, Sauron, that kind of stuff. It just would have given them a bit more time to have been fleshed out. I think they tried to put too many stories into season 1. I think, a couple things probably could have waited to season 2.
Yeah, I think, they just couldn't wait to show off some stuff.
Understandably, right? I mean, they seem to be excited, right? We've got Nerd of the Rings went to there. We got the Tolkien. You got all sorts of these people who are major Tolkien knowledge bases who got to go see the first 3 episodes. I think is what it was, and they point out they're like, the showrunners are excited about this. We're excited about this. Is it going to? We're not sure, how it's going to go after these episodes because we only saw the first 3 or whatever. But if you've created something that you think is really cool, you kind of can't wait to show everybody. I'm really bad at this. I take pictures of stuff that I've been making during the day, and I'll post it up on Instagram at 11 p.m., which is the worst time to post to Instagram. But I'm so excited that I can't wait for the next day to post it up. I just want to share it now.
Yeah.
So I get it. But when you're running a multi-million-dollar, you're working for Amazon, doing that kind of stuff, you gotta do the pacing right.
So also,
comments,
it's good to keep in mind that no one sets out to make a bad product.
No.
Everybody does their best. So I try to be a little kind. I know sometimes we complain, but that's complaining as a fan. But
I'm not a criticizer. I'm not the person who critiques things.
In a world of scales of 1 through 10, of a world of gray, right?
Yeah. We
like to look in the middle and say, well, there was always room for improvement. I mean, honestly, if we're talking about having it or not having it, I'm glad we have it.
Oh, easy.
I am so glad that we're getting more Lord of the Rings. There was definitely a void in my life where we didn't have Lord of the Rings. We haven't had something since 2000.
We don't watch Game of Thrones or any of that. So I mean, fantasy stuff there's not been a whole lot of fantasy stuff except for a couple of video games. We've had a lot of superhero stuff recently.
Sure, but I'm just talking about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I'm saying Lord of the Rings, which still to me is king. It changed the game as far as fantasy when it came to books, and then again when it came to movies. There was a void that wasn't being filled in a need that I wanted. And I'm glad that we have the Rings of Power. I'm one of the reasons I'm glad it's here, and I'm also glad that it's basically greenlit for 5 seasons, is because we have the potential for it to get better. Mm-hmm. If this was just somebody throwing darts, right? Like, hey, we're going to pay you just a few $1 million. We're going to make 1 season, see if it's any good. Mm-hmm. It might not get any more made and be like, well, I guess that was one-off and they're just going to end it.
Yeah.
Or they might wrap it up too early or something, right?
Yeah.
In a world of grays and scales, I'm just glad that we have it.
Yeah. I'm hoping that they'll take a lot of feedback, though, from maybe even the more well-known people who are big on Tolkien stuff, like Nerd of the Rings or the OneRing.net. Like, maybe they'll actually go and talk to these guys.
So, I actually don't... that doesn't matter to me. It's fine to have Tolkien lore. Like, we talk about the Palantiri, and the Palantiri may or may not be able to show the future. I think... what is his name? I think Corey's right where they don't. Where it's just Sauron messing with people, right? Mm-hmm. Which is fine. But let's say they change that, where it does show the future. doesn't matter to me. If they change stuff, great, but make it a good story.
Yeah.
You better give me a reason for the change.
Yeah,
Show
there
me
can
that
be
it
changes that work.
Show me that it matters to the story.
Yeah.
A great example of that, and people like to argue about it all the time, is the Lord of the Rings, the movies. Mm-hmm. There are changes, quite a lot of them, but it works.
The most talked about one is that Tom Bombadil.
That's the one that everybody likes to go to because it's easy to remember.
Yeah.
But they gave Aragorn basically a story arc that wasn't his. Mm-hmm. There was a bunch of changes.
Yeah.
I can't even remember them all. And people who are big Tolkien nerds and fans, they nitpick. To me, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it wasn't in there. Yeah, this was changed to that. The movies are good.
Oh, yeah.
The movies are darn good.
Yep.
And so none of that matters. Story is king. And if you can make a good story, nothing else matters. As another YouTuber says, is winning cures all. It doesn't matter that you had a crappy preseason. Doesn't matter that you lost that game. Doesn't matter that your coach sucks. If you win, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If it's a good story, it doesn't matter. Your CGI could be crap. Your side extras could be bad actors.
Those just become bonus points.
And so
for a lot of people, though, not everybody is on the same kind of wavelength as we are, though. We love stories. I mean, we read books all the time. Our favorite video games are story based. A lot of people put a lot of faith in the way something looks, though. So I mean, people are all about their high fidelity and their 1080 60s or whatever and stuff like that. And so
the internet likes to complain.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people actually rip on Breath of the Wild because it's not like realistic graphics. It's like, yeah, but this is Nintendo, guys. It's a great game.
And Nintendo has boiled it down to their version of story, right? Games, story might be important if you're like me, but games, honestly, is it fun?
Yeah.
Nothing else matters.
Yeah. So
that's all Nintendo care about.
Rings of Power, it looks phenomenal. It looks
cool.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love all the I'm a big costumes fan. You know that. I love the armor. I love the weaponry. I love like the moment when Elrond's kind of geeking out over Feanor's hammer and stuff. Like, it looks so good. And there's certain stories, as we have said multiple times, that are really good in this show. It just, some of it is a little bit of a letdown.
So By4 has a comment where he says Rings of Power Season 1 reminds him of Star Trek Discovery Season 1. He says both brands ruining the series. He says this has killed Lord of the Rings for him. I 100% disagree. And here's my argument for that. Is, well, yes, Discovery Season 1, I'm a big Star Trek fan as well. I'm not a fan. I quite hate Burnham as a character.
Discovery was...
And we watched the whole thing, all the seasons.
Yep.
Still to this day, I do not like Burnham. I love the other characters. I like some of the stuff they tried to do. Their story was a mess. I still like Star Trek. But, hold on.
Okay.
But, what came out of Discovery was Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is the best Star Trek we've had in a long time. Yes. I'm not saying it's Next Generation. I'm not even saying it's the original series. But it's good Star Trek. Now, you might disagree, and that's fine. Everybody has their different version of Star Trek, depending on your age and generation and stuff. But to me, Strange New Worlds is really good. And it's good, solid Star Trek.
It's because they went back to the roots of Star Trek, which was
episodic, one mission at a time,
and you have
focusing on the crew.
Overarching story that somehow fits into everything.
Sort of,
but
yeah.
every episode has a story that is answered.
And I've really liked Strange New Worlds.
Thought they needed to stretch a story over 8-10 episodes, and that didn't work for them.
And I think that goes down to whoever was making Discovery didn't know what they had. They didn't understand what Star Trek was at its core. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's the problem here. And this is why I disagree. I think the creators understand what they have. I think they understand Tolkien. I think they really love it, as we've talked about. I think they really poured their heart and soul into this, and I think it shows. It's a pretty good show. Do I have a lot of problems with it? Does it kind of conflict a lot with the lore? Yeah. It does. But I can kind of see the love and passion, right? I just think whoever they have writing the overarching story got either blinded by the fact that they're working on the Lord of the Rings, or they're just not that talented. Which, I mean, come on. I'm not a very good writer, so if you hired me to write on the Lord of the Rings, I would totally do it. Would I do a good job? No, I'd do
Probably
terrible
not.
because I'm not a good writer. But I would still do it if you hired me to do it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I ain't saying no to that.
So, I mean, I feel the love and passion. I actually think because of how season 1 ended, the 2 years, while it sucks, is going to help a lot. Mm-hmm. The more time you have, the better product you can make. A delayed game is never a bad game, but it's never a good game either. Like, the more time you have, the better. And so hopefully they can sort out some of these. Corey gave some great suggestions on how to sort out Galadriel. I think
hope they
there's
give us
a way.
Little something though over these next 2 years, just something a little more. So like, give me some like behind the scenes stuff. Give me a little something throughout these 2 years, because that'll help them with marketing. It'll keep it on the mind of everybody.
They should do.
That is a really long time.
They should do a special. They should do a special next Christmas. Now, how does Christmas and Lord of the Rings tie in?
Galadriel is reading a Christmas
No,
book.
I'm not saying something like that. But it could just be an interlude, right? Because for all I know, and something that I want there to be a time jump between season 1 and season 2. Give me a midway jump, right?
Something kind of artistic. So like with The Wheel of Time, which by the way, that season was terrible. But with The Wheel of Time, they did kind of these...
It was really
bad.
They
did these beyond the wheel or behind the wheel or something like that. That was a little bit more artistic, that gave kind of like further explanations to some of the magics of it.
I don't want that. I 100% don't want that.
I would like them to do something with kind of that artistic vein. So you don't need to bring like actors, but you could do like voice actors or voiceovers or something that kind of delve further into the backstory of some of this stuff. So like Corey's bringing up stuff from the Silmarillion and Feanor. You know, do some kind of like animated, not animation, but like some kind of artistic story of Feanor and his journey. Just something that kind of lets me understand some of these characters. Elrond and Elros's dad. Because that story is referenced how many times. I'd love for them to... But I understand they don't have rights to everything. So I like something throughout that helps me build in these gaps that I'm missing for somebody who hasn't read and probably won't read the Silmarillion and stuff like that.
So... I don't know.
I mean, probably wrap up soon, though.
Yeah. So Corey put another comments in where we're agreeing to disagree that it's still pretty good. Corey thinks he could write it better, which I say apply for the job then, Corey.
Hindsight is always
2020. Going in with a fresh perspective is hard. Yeah. But I mean, for all I know, you're a professional writer, and they need some help.
Yes. If you can help, please do. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
If you can help make this better, like, I agree that 2 years is going to suck for some things, but 2 years is going to be good for other things.
Yeah. But, I mean...
At least it's not like 5 or 6.
I think criticism, when given constructively, is helpful.
Yes.
So, I mean, always be kind to the showrunners and the actors and everything.
Don't go
they're doing the best they can, and they're working with what they got.
Especially Theo. Like, apparently he's been getting, like... terrible stuff sent into him. Like, guys, this is a kid, for Pete's sake. I don't care if he's 18. That's a kid.
But, I mean, yes, there are things I don't like. There are things I wish they would change. Still glad we have it over not having it.
Indeed.
But even if you wish they'd never done it in the first place, be kind. The internet needs more kindness. Yes. And us as fans are just trying to be helpful. We get on here to talk about it because we love fantasy. We
realize that we talk a lot about the things that we care about.
We do.
And we probably should have just started putting it on YouTube like years ago.
Because then at the end of the day, we'll be like, wow, that was a really good conversation. We probably should have put that up somewhere.
I don't even remember half the stuff we said. Yeah. For me, once I say it, it's usually like, I can remember it later, sort of, but I'm usually done with it. I'm like, okay, I've got it out. I don't need to think about it anymore.
Yeah. So this is more of a therapeutic tool for us. We appreciate
Yes.
you guys joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
I think
Corey,
there's some great ideas out there. And
we appreciate all feedback as well. Like,
Yeah,
as long as
we're
you're not
not
coming
perfect.
in to like trash the show for no good reason, or trash whatever we're talking about for no good reason. If you're coming in with genuine concerns, I want to hear them, even if I don't agree with them.
I
yeah.
like to talk. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So anyway, one of these days, I mean, I guess that's kind of it for our Reviews in the Dark of episodes 7 and 8, Rings of Power. One of these days we will get something up where we'll talk about what our 2023 plans are, because we have plans.
We do have plans. Has a
With a
small
capital
wrench
P.
thrown into that, but yeah.
Yeah. So, if you are feeling so inclined, please hit that like button, hit that bell, hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, help us out.
Hit a bunch of things
And we'll
on YouTube.
And we'll try to do as many of these as we can. All right.
That's it.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.